The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Monday, July 28th, 2025. We're live here at CHD TV. We have a great show for you this morning, but let's start with this Danish autism study. Does it hold up? We are getting battered over here at CHD TV and CHD, over this. So let's start with this article. Calls grow for journal to retract Danish study after corrected data show a link between aluminum and vaccines and autism. And the next headline here, or the next bit that's going to come up any second now, Lou, there we go. So this is a group. Does the Danish aluminum study hold up? The claim, anti-vaxxers are contradicting a new study claiming that aluminum in vaccine travels into the brain, sparking inflammation, and that this process can lead to autism, asthma, and other immune and neurological problems. But the facts, they say, are that Children's Health Defense article skews what the Danish cohort study shows in several ways. First, they claim that researchers only compared kids who got shots with aluminum compared with kids who got slightly less aluminum, when in reality, the data set included 15,237 children who received no aluminum vaccines before the age of 2. They also insist that the groups differed by only about 1 mg of aluminum when the study actually analyzed a full dose response span, capturing up to 4.5-fold difference in cumulative exposure. In the end, the study found that babies who received aluminum from their vaccines in the first 2 years did not have higher rates of any of the 50 health problems the researchers examined, and then it blah, blah, blahs on. So who better to get on to put this right than Karl Jablonowski, who has worked incredibly hard on getting us the truth and the facts. Good morning, Karl, and welcome to Good Morning CHD.
Good morning, Polly.
Right, put us right, tell the truth, because they're screaming at us, and we're getting battered left, right, and centre on this. But the truth is the truth, so over to you to put them right.
So first, the first word, anti-vaxxers. You know, the Model T came out in 1908, no seatbelts. Seatbelts weren't standard on any car until 1958. That's 50 years later. If you were in 1957 and said cars are not safe, you would be anti-car, anti-progress. There may be a time in our future where a vaccine, all it's doing is it's educating our immune system to identify a disease that we haven't yet seen. We've seen it through the vaccine molecules. We have never produced a safe vaccine. In the future, we may actually produce something that looks safe. And when they look back, they're going to see Children's Health Defense as the most pro-vaccine organization there was, because you don't get progress by saying it's safe and effective over and over again. You get progress by scrutinizing it, by being critical. So this Voices for Vaccines cites that we are claiming that it travels to the brain, sparks inflammation, which can lead to autism, asthma, and other immunological and neurodevelopmental problems. All of those can be found on links on this very communique, except for asthma, which, the CDC's own Frank DiStefano published a paper in 2022 that linked aluminum in vaccines to asthma. If you didn't have eczema and you had the vaccines, you had a 19% greater chance of having asthma. If you do have eczema, you had a 26% greater chance of contracting asthma. And Dr. Paul Offit is one of the science advisors for Voices for Vaccines. And when this study came out, he had a podcast where he called aluminum benign. And then he actually had this quote: "You're allowed to hide bad data. Really, you're allowed to not be transparent about data that in no way informs the public about whether one thing is associated with another." I can't make that up. That is the framework of bad science. That is, here is our data analysis. You are not allowed to scrutinize us. Every other condition, so the other conditions that these lead to, autism and immunological problems and neurodevelopmental problems, probably the best source to show that those are true are the paper that we are citing. It's not the text, the supplementary data of what I think might be the largest aluminum vaccine and disease study in the world. The supplementary data of that says, yes, there is an association between aluminum and autism and immunological problems and neurodevelopmental problems right there. They also say that we are claiming that it travels to the brain and sparks inflammation. They cite papers that say it travels to the brain and causes inflammation. I'll get to that in a second. But so in the first bullet point, they talk about how we're critical of them because they left out unvaccinated. They claim they didn't. Only 1.2% of children in the entire cohort study had no aluminum in a vaccine, and they never analyzed them. We can analyze them because they published an analysis of all of the children who had no aluminum in their vaccines, and if you could do the math to subtract one from the other, you could figure out what disease distributions were in the unvaccinated, and we saw statistically significant signal for atopic dermatitis or eczema and rhinoconjunctivitis. Now, the studies that they cite a CDC website, which just cites other studies. There are two studies they mention in the last paragraph. One is from Mobsas, who was the first author of a study who examined aluminum in 15 preterm babies. So they set up a study using 15 NICU babies who had been in the hospital for at least 2 months, ready for their 2-month vaccination. And they measured their aluminum and other elements composition before vaccination, and then they vaccinated them. And it is, I couldn't believe it when I read this study. They tell you the percent increase and decrease of iron, manganese, selenium, zinc, and copper. When it comes to aluminum, quote, "No significant change in levels of urinary or serum aluminum were seen after vaccination." They don't give you a number. In the title of this paper is, routine vaccinations on aluminum, and they're not telling you how much aluminum is that they're detecting. Further, the distribution of aluminum in these kids is really large and high. They had 11.1 nanograms per milliliter, which is, and I'll talk about the rabbit study later, 5 times larger than the largest measured recording of that rabbit study. And it has a huge standard deviation, absolutely huge. You would in fact need to double the aluminum content in these kids' blood to see a statistical significant difference. And they probably have high aluminum in their blood because they're in the NICU and they're receiving drugs, and drugs have aluminum in it. There's no getting around that. But what is the most damning is the MITCUS study. The CDC cites it as a measure of safety. Anderson and Havid cite it as a measure of safety. And Voices for Vaccines cite this study as a measure for safety. And in this study itself, it says aluminum causes inflammation, which is what Voices for Vaccines are accusing us of claiming. It also says 1% of whole body aluminum is present in the brain and central nervous system at any given time. Now, the rabbit, let me back up. So what the Mitkiss idea is that in theory, you have adjuvant that's injected into someone, and over time, it slowly gets converted to aluminum citrate, which is mostly processed out by the kidneys, while the rest of it waits patiently in the deltoid muscle, supposedly not doing anything. And that sounds really familiar about, injecting lipid nanoparticles into our deltoid and pretending they don't go anywhere else. Now, the rabbit study, they used a total of 4 rabbits, 2 for aluminum hydroxide and 2 for aluminum phosphate, an extremely low number of data points. Over a 28-day period of this study, only 17% of the aluminum hydroxide was taken up into the blood, and 51% of the aluminum phosphate was taken into the blood. So what happened with the rest of it? Mitkiss assumes that the missing 83% of aluminum hydroxide and 49% of aluminum phosphate are just waiting to be processed, and that is what his equations reflect. However, in that study, and thanks for pulling that up, Lou, you can see rabbit number 1 and number 2 had 13 and 22% difference, which averages to 17. That's a pretty big variability. But what is really striking is where the aluminum goes. It's found in the kidneys, spleen, liver, heart, lymph nodes, and in the brains. Now, the next one really floored me. It is a publication on all of our knowledge of what happens to aluminum citrate when it is in our blood. And that is based on one person. I did not believe it when I read it. This cannot be that our entire concept of what happens to aluminum citrate in our blood is based on one person. Holly, you and your experiences have been dismissed as anecdotes. The thousands or tens of thousands of people that you have interviewed who are vaccine injured themselves or parents of vaccine injured have been dismissed because they are anecdotes. This is one person, an anecdote. How is the difference between different races? Because a lot of medical things are. Well, we don't know because it's one person. How's the difference between male and female? We don't know because it was a male. How's the difference between children and adults? And we don't know because it was only an adult. I cannot believe it is based on one person. It's in a study called Priest et al. When they did look at that one person, they noted that 83% of the aluminum left by urine, about 2% through feces within 2 weeks. That leaves 15% of the aluminum, which the study says uptake by other compartments. And even a little over 3 years later, 4% of the original injected aluminum is still there. Now, Voices for Vaccines calls Mitkiss a study. It's not. It's a theoretical framework. It's a back of an envelope calculation. It's what you would expect like a college student to answer on a quiz of, well, how do we know if this works? Its basis is from the Agency of Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, and they extract from there a minimum risk level for aluminum, even though the document specifically says do not extract a minimum risk level for aluminum. They do it from the oral consumption and assume they know the number between what we have difference between oral and what's absorbed in our bloodstream. Assumption on assumption on assumption, and 4 rabbits and 1 person, and that is how that is the standard of safety for aluminum agitated vaccines that we are administering to millions of children throughout the world. Mikus later goes on to say, quote, given the present lack of evidence of harm due to the current aluminum levels, such studies may be low priority. Anderson et al. Just gave us really good evidence of really bad harm. I hope that we have a little higher priority in figuring out what happens to aluminum when it enters the body. The last point I wanted to make on this was a study by Gatti on brain tissue analysis. They have a fairly fancy machine that can do scanning tunneling microscope images, which you can see there on the left. That is an abnormality in an infant's brain. They can bombard that with electrons and measure the x-rays that come off of it to figure what and how much elements are in that particular anomaly. And what they find is carbon and silicon, and the third most prevalent, aluminum. This image is from a SIDS death. You know, there is no known positive biological function of aluminum. There is good hinting that there is a negative biological function. That study, you know, I can't say it's causal. That study examined 10 brain samples from infants and 10 brain samples from fetuses. You know, half of the infants were SIDS and half weren't. Half of the fetuses were sudden, unexpected intrauterine death, and half weren't. But one commonality they all had was aluminum in their brains. You got to stop and ask, what are we doing? When Voices for Vaccines accuse us anti-vaxxers of claiming that aluminum travels to the brain, that's because aluminum travels to the brain. And my last point on this is that Anderson and Havid had the immunization records and the diagnosis history of 335 children who died before their 2nd birthday. Aren't you curious? They did one of the worst things you could. They dismissed them.
Karl, is so shocking. I almost have no words for this. I'm so grateful to you for bringing us this update, the truth. But one person, how many have died because of this, because of the fraudulent darkness of it all?
I don't know, but unless it stops, more will. And I'm not surprised that mainstream media has not picked up on the fact that the largest study on aluminum and autism is fraudulent. And I don't use that word very often, but there is no sequence of events that can get us to where we are without intentional deception beforehand. Even the file that is updated in the supplementary, you can look at the metadata. You could download the file from the journal's website and look at the metadata to see that it was created January 9th, which is 6 days before the wrong data was published. Now, you know, really, how important is this study? How important was it to do correctly? And that it wasn't done correctly, the media is dropping the ball on this, probably in perspective, when a bunch of scientists got together to decide that Pluto wasn't a planet anymore, the entire world knew the very next day that Pluto is suddenly not a planet. And that label has nothing to do with anything germane to everyday life. It certainly doesn't have anything to do with, the health of our children. The biggest study on aluminum and autism is a fraud, and the media is not running with it.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. Follow the money on that one, I would say. Karl Jablonowski, thank you so much for your endless research and educating us the truth. Our senior research scientist at Children's Health Defence, thank you so much for being on so early as well this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Well, wow. Thank goodness we have Karl to keep us updated on the truth. And more will come on that as Karl develops, gets more on this information as things develop. We will bring him on to CHD TV to keep you updated. We will not let this story die. It's too important. All right. Well, now we have Nurse Jackie coming on. Good morning, Jacqueline. I see your name is. Good morning, Jacqueline.
How are you, Polly? I'm good, thank you.
Now, tell everybody what kind of a nurse you are.
I've done a little bit of lots of different, but I'm mostly just a bedside nurse. So your standard medical floor, that's where you'd find me.
Okay, not just about these bedside nurses are incredibly important, especially good ones like you. And you have 4 unvaccinated children.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have 4 daughters. They are 6, 3.5, 1.5, and 4 months. Right here, you can see with me. And they have not had anything at all. COVID vaccine, regular standard childhood vaccines, none of it.
What about vitamin K?
Let's see, 2 of them did have vitamin K. My first 2, all of them have been cesareans. So my first 2, I wasn't as educated on that, but the other ones I did waive, my last 2.
So here's the big question. What made you, as a nurse, someone who's gone through medical training, what made you decide not to vaccinate your children?
There is a lot that goes on inside of the medical system that does not necessarily follow evidence-based practice. And to me, vaccines are one of them, especially working through COVID. There were a lot of things that just really started coming out that things just were not safe. And my mom had a big influence on me. She stopped vaccinating us after let's see, I'm the oldest, so the 3rd brother. There are 8 of us total, so the last 4 or 5 children have not had any vaccines. And so she really influenced me to do my own research. And then once I did, and then once COVID hit after that, it really just cemented that this is not something I want to be injecting my children with at all.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Just to wind back to your siblings. So 4 of them have had no vaccines. And how old are they?
Let's see, that would be starting, how old am I? About 21 years old and down to 7 years old.
And how are they, those 4 unvaccinated children?
Well, actually, all of us are in near perfect health. The younger ones, especially, they don't have, all the standard childhood problems, ear infections, respiratory infections, eczema, all those things that, you see in children at a high rate, just kind of in general. We don't really have those problems in our family.
And your children, your 4 children, how are they? Do they get sick? I mean, we no one's saying kids don't get sick.
Well, I mean, yeah, anybody can catch the common cold, but between the 4 of them, so, and remember, this is with my husband and I both working at separate hospitals, being exposed to all kinds of, viruses and infectious diseases. Oh yeah, there's a picture of us together when I went and saw him one day. We have never had a child hospitalized. We've never had an ear infection. We've never had RSV, never had any type of developmental delay diagnosed or, neurobiological problems. So I feel very thankful. I do feel that choosing not to vaccinate has played a huge part in that, because our children are healthy, they're normal, and they are, I think, as God designed them to be.
And your husband's medical as well then?
Yeah, he's a nurse as well, and right now he's working in the ER.
And he was on board with this?
Yeah, thankfully. I've had a lot of strange ideas. He was raised in Southern California, so very, very different upbringing. Him and his siblings did not grow up in a home where, you know, vaccination was something that was talked about. They just kind of did all the normal things. And so I'm very thankful that when he married me, he was willing to give me some wiggle room to make choices that I felt were better for our children.
And how does he feel about your beautiful, healthy children now? Does he feel you've made the right decision?
I think so. And there's been a couple of times where some of his coworkers have kind of made comments like, oh, you don't vaccinate your children, or, you know, how has that turned out? And I think that we are very thankful because everybody we know that has vaccinated children, there's asthma, there's developmental delays, you know, autism. And I think that he's very thankful that we made the choice to just keep our children from being exposed to all of the aluminum and adjuvants that are really damaging other children.
Now, are you afraid of measles, mumps, rubella, I don't know, all of those kind of things?
You know, I'm really not, because, you know, you take tetanus, for example, and they want to stab you with a tetanus vaccine anytime you walk barefoot outside. But, you know, the treatment for that is so simple and the survivability is so high. You know, even with COVID, children who caught COVID, the deaths were so low and the major illness was so low. My stance has always been that, you know, if I'm going to trust the Lord in every other part of my life, I'm going to trust him with the health of my children and with these childhood illnesses that everybody wants to be so scared of. Actually have a very high rate of survivability, and I would rather take my chance on an actual real live infection than on an injection that I don't know what the repercussions of that are going to be.
Jacqueline, you were a nurse during COVID.
Yes.
So tell us what that was like, because you were outspoken about the COVID shot, weren't you?
Yes, and there was a lot of fear in the beginning. There was so much that was unknown, and you know, you couldn't go more than about 2 seconds without somebody either commenting on the effectiveness of the vaccine and how great it was that we were going to have this vaccine. But then you had people getting vaccine injured before that was acceptable to talk about. And I saw several of my peers rush out to get the vaccine, several nursing friends, and then suffer debilitating reactions. And, you know, already being vaccine injury aware from choosing not to follow the childhood schedule, as soon as the COVID, you know, quote vaccine, because it's not actually a vaccine, it's a totally different product than what most people think it is. I kind of saw that was a fraud right away. And I was especially hesitant because I was pregnant at the time. And Paula, you'll love this. So I was working on a psychiatric floor, and a psychiatrist, not even an immunologist or, you know, somebody who works in infectious disease, we were going over in a board meeting, and I had stated that I wasn't getting the vaccine and I was pursuing an exemption because I was pregnant. He's like, oh, well, I can give you the research that states it's safe and effective. And I was like, this vaccine has been out for all of 2 months. This was 2 months after it had been released to the public. And I wanted to ask him, where are you getting these documents, these supposed documents? And so there was so many conversations like that early on that people thought you were a lunatic. You know, here I was wearing PPE, mask, you know, respirator, doing all the things, taking care of patients on the bedside. And they thought I was literally insane for not getting this injection that was supposed to protect me. And now here we are years later, and I am still very, very thankful for that choice. And fortunately, again, my husband was willing to go along with me on that and chose not to receive the vaccine as well, even though he was also working, you know, bedside nursing at that time also.
It's incredible, Jacqueline, isn't it? I mean, we were brought up to, you know, respect people in authority, if you like. If you're a doctor, you're apparently super smart. But
Yeah.
now through COVID and stuff, it's really extraordinary when you hear non-stop stories like you just told about the almost stupidity of these people.
Yes. Yes.
And your husband working in ER makes me feel, because he's obviously a good man, so it makes me feel good that but most of our viewers, I would say, do not want to go to hospital because we've seen what happened during COVID, that the vaccinated versus unvaccinated were separated, treated differently, potentially killed. And there's a beautiful unvaccinated child in the background.
Mhm.
So what do you say about the hospitals? Do you think they're dangerous places to go?
I think that if you absolutely need to go to a hospital, you should go in with your eyes open, and you should not take everything that you're told at face value. You should get second opinions. You should, really actually read the informed consent papers that they give you, because there are so many. Even just when I give medicines in the morning, when I hand out morning med pass, that cup full of pills that people take every day without question, without anything, there are so many hidden dangers within that. So if you're going to be in the hospital, don't assume everybody's out to get you. Obviously, we're not malicious, especially people like me who are just trying to serve our patients as well we can within the system. But definitely keep your eyes open and keep your wits about you.
A great advice. And Jacqueline, what's your advice to the young mum who's just reading the wrong media, if you like, watching the wrong media, and is petrified of the disease, so therefore is going to vaccinate, but in her gut feels that vaccinating's wrong, but doesn't know what to do?
Oh goodness, my heart goes out to her, because there are so many things that I have been that young mom on. But you need to do research, and you don't need to just Google it, because if you pop, anything on vaccinations into a standard search engine, you're not going to get anything. So my hope for that young mom would be that she could find Children's Health Defense or a similar organization and actually get truthful, unfiltered information that is safety based. It's not fear mongering. It's not trying to push an agenda. We're not following the dollars, but we're following the actual research. So that is my hope for that mom, is that she would just be able to step back and think and follow the patterns and look at the children around her and say, is this how I want my children to be? And if it is, then yeah, I'll go to a pediatrician. I'll follow the standard childhood schedule. I'll let them, eat red dye 40. But if not, if that's not how she wants her children, if she doesn't want asthma and autism and all the other things, then she may want to make different choices.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would go any other way than your way, Jacqueline. You're an amazing family, and I appreciate you so much for coming on. It's such a brave thing to do in this day and age. So thank you, and to your beautiful children as well. You've got a great future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Polly. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Well, that was a great story, everybody. How nice to have an uplifting story. Well, we're going to go to Mothers to Be now with Christiane Northrup. I'm standing in for Isabella Tommy. Sorry, she's not Isabella Tommy anymore. She's Isabella Yon. I'm standing in for her, and you'll find out why in a minute. And then we've got an unvaccinated story. So exciting times. We're going to have a great week. I can feel it. Michael Caine will be with you tomorrow morning, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Welcome to Mothers to Be this week. I'm Polly Tommy. I'm standing in for Isabella Yon this week again. We have the amazing Christiane Northrup, Dr. Northrup, with us again. And this week we are going to be talking about pregnancy. So welcome to the show, Dr. Northrup. Thank you for coming back.
A pleasure.
So many questions in this segment. I don't even know where to start, but let's start with morning sickness. I think it's very relevant, as Isabella should be here and is suffering greatly with morning sickness. So, we've tried the ginger, we're trying everything, but she just can't everything. And we've never seen her like this in a pregnancy. So, what do you say to people with terrible morning sickness like our Isabella?
Well, it's interesting. There's this term for when it's really bad called hyperemesis gravidarum, where you even need to be hospitalized sometimes with intravenous fluid. Believe it or not, years ago, I used to send those women to a anesthesiologist who specialized in hypnosis, and it worked almost 100% of the time. And now, what does hypnosis do? It simply helps you change your biochemical state. It helps you change your frequency. So what you're doing when you're pregnant and you have hyperemesis, it is a big detoxification. The body's going through a big detox. And so, and think about it like this. Very often when you have it, the smell of food puts you off. The smell of bacon puts you off. You can't even think about it. Your body is detoxing all the bad stuff. But what's amazing is that you're growing a perfectly normal, beautiful baby inside. I mean, this is what's amazing to me, because I would watch women, they'd go through the whole pregnancy, not gain a pound, and then have this perfectly normal baby. So let's remember that nothing untoward is going to happen. But hypnosis, anything to just get really, really calm. And then remember that our environment at this point, with all of the EMF, with all of the bad news, with all of the doom scrolling. I mean, when I was growing up, there were 3 stations on television and you needed to turn the TV on. Now, for 24/7, you can find all the bad news you want. So you've got to change the channel. She needs to rest more, hydrate more, and be really like, you got to treat her like Mother Mary, like she's got inside baby Jesus, and everything she needs to do to be protected and to be loved. Now, but if she is on your show, has a regular job and all that, she's going to feel guilty. Oh my God, I should be getting back to work. I can't do this. No, 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 no. This is what my baby, this soul in me who chose me to be the vessel for their life, this soul is teaching me a thing or two, and it begins right away. So whatever I'm doing that has caused me to grind away or strive or whatever, there is a divine message in this for me. And of course you do the ginger tablets and you do the saltine crackers or whatever you can keep down. But understand that your body has the ability to, with frequency, create just about everything you need. So I would do meditation, I would do sleeping, I would make sure that you're listening to those high frequency tones. In ancient China, they used to put the pregnant women, kind of in a bubble where you just were fed and cared for. Can you imagine? And that you were the most important thing on the planet because you were growing the next generation. So I want her to think about the fact that her body is saying to her, I don't care what your ego wants you to do. This, your body, which you can't override, and me, your baby, we got something else we're going to teach you. And we're going to teach you how to be in a completely different realm as you're growing this baby. These are what happens in utero, sets the tone for your entire life. So let's just be so precious about these 9 months.
Thank you for that. And it is interesting to me how some people get morning sickness. Some people don't get a slightest bit of morning sickness.
Right. I think it has to do with liver detoxification. And that's why, and I wouldn't do this during pregnancy, but before, when you're preparing to get pregnant, make sure your liver is all detoxified. You're taking binders so that, like if you're constipated, then you're toxic. It gives new meaning to the word you're full of. Yes. So what you want to do is make sure that you're doing some cleanses, that you're getting things moving through. We all could use this. Binders are things like high quality zeolite. There's bad stuff. There's good stuff. Activated charcoal. There's bentonite clay. There's apple pectin. All of these things should be just regular parts of our diet, especially as you are preparing to get pregnant. I remember a quote from years ago, the best time to start eating right for your baby is 2 years before it's born. Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Well, the other, I would say a lot of people contacting us about bleeding and how, so some are saying that they bled quite early on. I mean, this is the trouble, Dr. Northrup, is when I was having babies, we didn't have all this information that these young mums have now. I mean, they can find out they're pregnant almost straight after conception. Well, we had to wait till we were about, I don't know. And so some people saying that they bled and they didn't know they were pregnant, and then they were rushed into hospital because they thought, ectopic pregnancy, and it's just like huge drama these days. What's your advice on bleeding? Because sometimes it does not necessarily mean a miscarriage, right?
Right. It's very common. I mean, we've had people who sort of bleed a little bit all the way till 20 weeks. What you need to do, all right, you please, women, stay away from the frickin' internet when you're looking for symptoms. And I want you to know why. All the good stuff, all the reassuring stuff has been scrubbed. It's been scrubbed. Don't ever use, the search engines you should use are Brave. And I think even DuckDuckGo has been compromised. You need to understand, and I was shocked by this, Polly. When I went, for instance, I wanted to find out the statistics on the number of people who need renal transplants from taking Tylenol, all right? Well, that's like, number 12 in the search engine, but if you go to Google, you can't find it. There's all these things that I know as a doctor from practicing before social media that you can't find. So I want people to understand that you're going to have to go to different sources. You've got to, if you're in conventional medicine, please understand it's a very limited view that you're getting, because it's all based on a diagnosis. It's all based on something is wrong. It's all based on, we'll give you this drug to take care of it. Absolutely none of it is based on, okay, this happens because of implantation. A lot of times when the blastocyst implants into the uterine wall, there'll be a little bit of blood. Or let's say that the newly forming placenta just lifts up a little bit and there's a little bit of blood and it just goes away. I mean, I can't tell you how many people were told that, this is not good, whatever, and then they would go on to have a healthy baby. I remember way back, I had a patient with a fibroid, a rather substantial fibroid, and she got pregnant, and she was told, you better terminate the pregnancy because that fibroid is going to grow, and this is going to cause a problem. And I said to her, let's just see what God's going to do here with your body. She had a perfectly normal pregnancy. And yes, she had a fibroid. And a lot of times the fibroids in pregnancy will disintegrate. And the first thing they do is the blood supply gets cut off. And so they kind of get necrotic in the middle. It causes pain, but it goes away. I mean, we have to understand nature has a way of healing these things. So the main thing is stay out of fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And then what you're going to do, because you have created a frequency of fear, everything that comes into your screen, into your phones, into your friends, everything that comes in is going to be based on fear, because you're setting that tone. This is the tone of fight or flight or fear. And then you will accumulate evidence like a lint roller. You're going to accumulate all the evidence that you're doomed. That's how it works. We create our own reality with God. And so you get to choose doom and gloom and ain't it awful, or made in the image of God, everything will be well. And when you're in that peaceful state of digested stress hormones, your entire physiology calms down. And okay, let's talk about the baby inside. So you have a baby inside. Now we know this from years ago. When a woman smoked a cigarette, it shuts off the blood supply to the baby. So the baby goes into a panic state every time the mother smokes a cigarette. But, and this is interesting, the taste of the cigarette will be in her bloodstream and in her breast milk. And so the baby will grow up, if it's breastfed, kind of preferring that taste of whatever the smoking is. So what you want to do though is, and then, you know, it's not like I can say to you, calm down when you're completely flummoxed. That's not going to help you. You need to do things like I said, grounding. Take your foot and begin massaging your foot. Every point in your body, every organ is represented on the sole of your foot. Every organ is represented on the palm of your hand. Every organ is represented on your ear. Just begin to do some things where you are stimulating those points in the body. Be with a friend who's calm and maybe give you a massage. Put on some praise music. Make things as you want a dome of goodliness and godliness over you. And you can get that just by lying down on the ground.
Dr. Northrup, let's talk about ultrasounds, because following on from the bleeding, so they start panicking, they contact their hospitals, whatever it is, and they're rushed in for internal scans, scan, and then they come up with all this drama that's wrong with the baby, which often is not. You know, it's too small, it's too big, it hasn't got this, hasn't got that. And so then some young mums are having weekly scans because they're so petrified, and the mainstream doctors are telling them to do. Can you talk about ultrasounds? Are they necessary?
I am very skeptical about ultrasounds. And in fact, my colleague, Dr. Larry Palevsky, well known to your show, has sent me studies showing how disruptive that ultrasound vibration is to the baby. We think it's benign. It's not benign. I don't have the studies in front of me. I personally never had an ultrasound when I was pregnant with my 2 children. I never had anything. And somehow I just knew, don't do all this. And I happened to be present when all this stuff came into my field, like fetal monitoring. And I watched the C-section rate skyrocket within a month. To this day, and I want to get this out there to people, to this day, there has not been one single study, a prospective placebo-controlled trial on fetal monitoring that shows that fetal monitors do anything to decrease perinatal mortality. Not one, not a single study showing that a fetal monitor does better than a nurse just checking the heartbeat with the old stethoscope. In fact, what we have is studies showing, and these were done by Dr. Marshall Klaus and John Kennel, who did the first work on maternal-infant bonding. And they went on to show that the presence of a doula, a woman just sitting in the room, decreased the labor time substantially and decreased the C-section rate by 60%. And I remember asking John Kennel about this, and Marshall Klaus, who was an OBGYN. John Kennel started the first neonatal intensive care unit at Rainbow Children's Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. And, you know, I remember him saying, if this woman standing by were a drug, it would be unethical not to use it. So this is the human biofield. This is the effect of a person who is calm and understands the ability of the body to be healthy, interacting with you. When you're constantly running, what does a labor and delivery unit run on at this point? Fear. I remember learning a normal labor and birth is a retrospective diagnosis, meaning you're only going to know that it's normal until it's over. So let's therefore treat everybody here as though they are a disaster waiting to happen. So when people would come in, I would rupture the membranes, thread in an intrauterine fetal monitor, and screw a fetal scalp electrode to the crown chakra and put in a 16 gauge needle that hurts. And then you could proceed with labor. Well, you've interrupted it then so much. I mean, this is why there's a wonderful play called Birth. And the first line is, I want what my dog got. Like, I'd like to be treated in labor as though I were a precious animal. I mean, do we go in when a horse is birthing and have all these strangers putting their hands up the horse's birth canal with bright lights? Do we do that? Do we no, you know that the animal needs peace and calm to give birth. We have made human birth so medicalized that it is no wonder, Polly, that there's this new free birth movement. I don't know if you've seen it on, it's amazing to me. On YouTube, they have these women birthing at home, breeches, meconium, everything is just fine. And now I'm not recommending this, but I understand it. So ultrasound running in constantly, I want instead for each of us to learn how to tune into the baby. I frankly wish I had done this more. I was running around being an OBGYN, you know, when I was pregnant with my kids. I have apologized to them. But you want to tune into this baby and let it know, I'm taking care of you. You will be fine. You know what's amazing? How many normal babies are born despite their mother's bad habits, despite it. And then look at the human race. How many people are thriving, even though they've had 72, you know, they've been on the CDC poisoning schedule. So really, people, I guess what my answer to you is, do less, trust more.
Right. We have a viewer asking about the glucose test, which is not something I had in my days. I don't even know what that is, but she said she did it with her first pregnancy and literally collapsed from taking, I presume, so much glucose or whatever sugary drink they give. Do they need to have this? What's it about?
Glucose tolerance test.
Right.
So you drink a measured amount of glucose, and then they measure your blood sugar at different intervals for, you know, the next like 4 hours or so. And it's done to determine if you are a pre-diabetic. But let me tell you what happens, and this is the work of Ellen Langer from Harvard. When you tell someone they are a pre-diabetic, many will go on to become diabetic because of a self-fulfilling prophecy. She did this study in her book, Counterclockwise. And then she has another book, and the subtext is Thinking Your Way to Chronic Health. It's a wonderful book. Ellen Langer, focus of mindfulness, how you think about something. And she found out that people who had a blood sugar, let's say it was 99, and they were told that's normal. But then the ones who had a blood sugar of 100 were told they were pre-diabetic. All right. Now, I want you to know, if you did that blood test again 5 minutes later, it would be different. But the ones who were told you're pre-diabetic went on to get diabetes. Oh, I'm a pre-diabetic. You know, the ones who were told you're fine were fine. It's how you're thinking about it constantly. So the glucose tolerance test, they want to see if you're going to start spilling sugar. And there's no question that pregnancy is a major stress to the pancreas, which is why if you are a brittle diabetic and you get pregnant, it's really has to be managed. It has to be managed. It's a tough kind of a deal. But for a regular woman, all right, please understand, everybody, adult onset diabetes has become childhood diabetes. 8-year-olds now have it. And it's from the diet and all the high fructose corn syrup. And you don't need to get that. You just need to change your diet and change your lifestyle. And I understand that's hard compared to going in, but it's like, okay, that's hard now, but you live way longer. This is easy now, but you'll be dead.
Well, Dr. Northrup, we're out of time for this week, but I want to carry this conversation straight on to next week because we have so many more questions. We almost need you every week. So just remind everybody again of your books, Mother, Daughter Wisdom and
Daughter Wisdom and Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. Yes.
And they can follow you also on Substack.
Yes, True North on Substack, and drnorthrup.com is my website with the links to everything.
Dr. Northrup, thank you so much for coming on this week and talking to us about it. We'll see you next week with a great many more questions.
Very good.
My name is Professor Johanna Sophia.
That's a nice name. And you're 70 years old, and have you never had a vaccine?
I am indeed 70 years old, and I have never, ever had a vaccine in my life.
That's amazing. Well, now, do you have any illnesses?
Oh, I'm crippled, as you can see, and I can't. No.
Do you have polio or autism?
I have no illnesses that I know of. And that in spite of the fact that I was born with a little hole in my heart and I was sick quite a lot as a child, more to do with my parents didn't know that dairy causes a lot of inflammation in children that are sensitive. And so I had ear infections, etc. But it did not lead to any vaccines. And I naturally had measles and rubella and a little bit of whooping cough, which was very light. So I never felt that I had the need for any vaccine. And when I traveled a lot in my life, I had the same notion. Well, it came from my parents. My parents were both Waldorf teachers, and they thought that chemicals derived from literally the gases used in the gas chambers in Germany. My parents are German. Were not a good idea to use as vaccines and herbicides and pesticides and all those kind of chemicals derived from that huge factory that was now standing there, producing all kinds of other chemicals after the Second World War. So that just as an aside. So my parents were very aware. They were pacifists, and they did not like, therefore, the whole concept of allopathic medicine. So it was homeopathy in our life, and what they did the best they could in terms of healthy eating. Organic just became a thing. So that's how I grew up.
And you then, well, once you became an adult, you could then make your own decisions. You just carried that on then, did you? Because
I absolutely did, because I had no reason to think otherwise. And maybe there were pressures sometimes, especially when I decided to follow my then first husband to Africa, to Zimbabwe, and lived in Zimbabwe from 81 to 85 and a half, and also traveled within Africa a little bit. Yeah, and some people said, yeah, but you need to get this and you need to get that, and isn't it dangerous? But no, nature is the same everywhere on this little planet. That's what I came to conclude. And nature works the same everywhere on the planet. So if I keep myself as healthy and fit as possible, then I can withstand or go through, if necessary, some health challenges. But they aren't really as many health challenges as we make it out to be, is my experience.
Yeah, the fear-mongering.
Yeah. So, and I've been in, like I said, I've been in about 30 some countries, and I've worked for longer periods of time in about 10, from France to Zimbabwe to Romania to a couple of others. So I never had the feeling that I need to be scared of diseases. I know that when I stress myself, and because I'm a little bit cocky in terms of my health, I would then say I don't need more than 3-4 hours of sleep, right? And as a single mom for a long time, I felt that I could handle that, only to learn that that was not such a good idea. I should actually take better care of my body and do my fitness and eat healthy. And
So you're a mum. Let's talk about
I'm
your
a
children.
mom, yeah.
Did you vaccinate your children?
Well, that's a little bit of a, I'm going to try and make it very short. I was desperately wanting to be a mom, and at age 40, I was so happy to be able to adopt a child with my then husband, and my daughter was 3 months old when she came to me, but the adoption procedure was not completed. And in that first, it took a whole year to get the adoption finalization date with the court, which was cruel, I thought, because I could not actually implement what I would have wanted. I mean, I did a lot, whatever I could to give her the extra taurine and the extra juices, etc. But I had to go to one so-called well visit, and I had this, it's going to make me cry, sorry.
It's okay.
I can't talk about it without it. And my little daughter sat on my lap, and she screamed like I was betraying her. And she got that shot when she got that shot. And then I said to the doctor, I will never do this again. I don't care. And yeah, but your 6 months well visit is coming up, and you need to, and I got some literature, and it said in the literature that it's optional, that one can postpone those shots, even under the state rule of adoption. So I said, I'm not coming back. I will postpone, and because I knew that by the time that postponement would run out, I would have the adoption completed. And the wonderful thing is that I was pregnant with my son, and he didn't need to get anything. And actually 5 days after he was born, we all went to court with my little baby in a basket, went to court and finalized my daughter's adoption, and our family was complete. So
I'm sorry you had to go through that though.
yeah, it was, and like I said, it's something that haunts you. And she will say to me, oh, Mom, come on, I got over it, you know, I don't have any particular health issues. And sometimes I feel it's not physical health issues, but other issues, anxieties, nervousness, and those kind of issues that make it hard sometimes for her to be comfortable in her own body. But she's got a brilliant brain, and she's going to be she's going for her doctorate in psychology, so she's going to be a brilliant psychologist. Yeah. And here I am, ran my first half marathon at 64 because I thought I really need to give myself another booster. Not that kind, the natural one.
Well, it's just it's wonderful to have you here on the bus. And they say, you know, the people that are unvaccinated are a danger and they're going to die of measles. And look at you, you're 70, you're unvaccinated, you're super healthy. And I can't thank you enough for coming and telling us that.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy you're doing this, because and I said, I am so happy to be 70 because it feels great. I have all this experience. I have a body that's better functioning than ever. And I have a full 30 years ahead of me, at least.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored.
These childhood vaccinations, the people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there.
Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period. My son's life has been ruined physically and emotionally, and he is persecuted for the mere fact that he exists.
After 8 years of litigation, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence that Chris died from her HPV vaccinations.
Parents deserve the truth. We deserve real informed consent. because no parent should have to live the nightmare I do.
I am heartbroken to hear these stories. And it makes me want to do something.
How about we ban pharmaceutical ads on TV?
I've advocated it, and you have a co-sponsor.
The government has decided that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody.
I am extremely suspicious, as a lawyer, of immunity that is granted in any blanket way across the board to any manufacturer or to anyone.
So if we're gonna do something, the North Star has gotta be medical freedom. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's gotta be accountability.
No more Pfizer-sponsored science. We need independent science.
I am competing against a pharmaceutical lobby of 1,600 lobbyists. That's 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress. This is insane.
Everybody sitting here, bar 2, vaccinated their families with catastrophic results. Over 12,000 signatures on those 2 buses of death, death, death. When will enough be enough? How many more buses? So this has to stop. And we implore you, please, to follow us at children's health events, at least break down the truth and get to the truth behind the science of what is really happening.